Welcome to the debut of No Remorse Sports here on Sports Talk Line, where, hey, if you like, go and subscribe and hit the like button, because why the hell not? No, I mean, seriously, why? Hit subscribe right now. Hit like, because you know you're in for a treat right now. Anyway, first things first. I talked a little bit on the roundtable a week ago about how the owners put to the table, and they eventually shelved the new potential Rooney Rule, which would give teams an opportunity to jump up as much as 15 spots in the third round if they were to hire a minority coach or a minority executive of some sort. Now, let's call this for what it is. It's a bribe. They're bribing teams to do this, and I think it's completely misplaced. First, we have to take a deep dive. Why are there not as many black coaches in the league right now? Why? There's a number of reasons. First and foremost, listen, there's no perfect solution. There's no perfect solution. As Van was saying on the show, there's never going to be an opportunity where everybody's happy. I mean, there's either not going to be enough, there's not going to be enough coaches, or the other side is saying that it's going to be reverse racism of some sort. Now, I suggested, and this isn't my original idea, but I'm going to take credit for it right now, God damn it, is having some sort of a coaching academy. Now, what that would do is the majority of the players that would most likely sign up for that would be black. And by virtue of that, you're just going to get more minority coaches, and you're getting the ecosystem of the NFL coaching and executives. It's just making that ecosystem better, straight up. Hold on, let me look at my notes. First and foremost, I think there's a myth, and the myth is this: that we're hiring our best and brightest out here, and that's exactly what teams are doing when they are hiring a potential coach or an executive. That's not true. This is very much an elected position. Just like anything else, it's an elected position. You have to sell your fan base on the product. You have to sell them on the fact that we're going to win ball games. It's the only thing that's going to survive the fans coming with torches after a 6-10 season, or after you lose 4 games in a row. That's just the way it is. You have to be able to sell this product. That's why you see guys like Zach Taylor in the Cincinnati Bengals right now. I mean, you can't tell me with a straight face that a big part of the reason why he got his job is because of his association with Sean McVay. Same with Joe Judge and the New York Giants right now, the New Jersey Giants. I don't care. You play in Jersey, you're not New York. Buffalo's the New York team. Anyhow, his association with Bill Belichick was a big selling point to that organization. He was just a special teams coordinator, mind you. Or if you want to dig a little further back, when John Harbaugh got his job in Baltimore, this was a product being associated with Andy Reid. And another guy a lot of people are whose names is out there is Eric Bieniemy, who is the offensive coordinator of the Kansas City Chiefs right now. I expect him to be one of the first coaches taken after 2021, that season, a black coach. And Gerard Mayo, I think he's going to be a coach in the next 3 to 7 years, and he's a linebacker coach currently. So that's a big part of it. Once you're introduced in these ecosystems of coaches, it makes your marketability that much better, and that's just the way it is. Listen, this would never, ever, ever happen. But let's say, for instance, that the NFL found a proving ground that they can go ahead and import coaches or executives. They go and they flood the sweatshops at Nike in China, or they go the Comcast headquarters in India, and they imported those coaches, and they found that a winning solution like that. They do it in a second. Never, ever happen, but they do it. And you know why I'd like to see that happen is because the diversity committee's head would explode. It would. I mean, they're going to look at this. We have 98% of the league are minority coaches, but wrong kind. Wrong kind. They're never going to say that because they're in the ecosystem of political correctness. So let's call this for what it is. They want more black coaches because over 2/3 of the league are black players. And how do we get those black players into executive positions, and do we get them into coaching opportunities? The coaching academy is the perfect way, because even ask someone like an Ozzie Newsome, who was the great general manager of the Baltimore Ravens. He admittedly, once he took an executive position with them, had no idea what he was doing. He just didn't. Same with Jim Harbaugh. Jim Harbaugh, when he first got his first coaching gig with the then Oakland Raiders, he said, I didn't know how to prepare a team. Yeah, I understand football, but I don't understand, how to do a PowerPoint presentation to really coach these guys. It's completely different. And so I think once you develop something like that, you're going to have an improved coaching system and you're going to have more diversity. Now, like I said, it's not going to be easy, and it's not going to be an easy sell to anybody, but and if you want to take a look at the myth of meritocracy in the NFL, just take a look. I'm going to use a name that people are very familiar with at ESPN, Louis Riddick. Louis Riddick worked in an NFL front office, first with the Redskins and then with the Eagles, which was a very powerful front office, working with Andy Reid, working with Joe Banner, and then working with Howie Roseman, who's now the general manager. This guy should be getting the opportunities. And admittedly himself has admitted that he hasn't been out there searching. Now let's take then comparison. The San Francisco 49ers several years ago hired John Lynch as their general manager. John Lynch hasn't spent a day of his life previous to that in an NFL front office. Take a look at Mike Mayock, how he got his job. Didn't spend a day inside an NFL front office. Hasn't worked a day in an NFL front office in his life. But both were media personalities. John Lynch was a decorated player, made him easy to sell to the fan base. Same with Mike Mayock, doing his work with the NFL Network, breaking down draft picks. That was an easy sell to the fan base. That's what it was. And let's be honest. John Lynch is playing around with a toy chest while Kyle Shanahan's doing the shot calling here. Let's make no mistake about it. This dude's a puppet. So is Mike Mayock. We know John Gruden is really calling the shots with the Raiders now, the now Las Vegas Raiders. So this idea, if we're just comparing resumes, compare the two's resumes. Those two worked in media. Louis Riddick has worked in front office, worked in front offices and was a player director of personnel. That's a high-ranking position. So if we're just saying it's based off of meritocracy and the best and the brightest, just comparing resumes there, that's just not the case. Now, there are just so many other layers to this. First is the electability. And you have to have a certain presence. Then you have to have a presentation. Some people might not be good interviewers. That's another thing that could really be taught at these coaching or executive academies if they were to happen. And the NFL has the money to make this happen. That's the funny thing. And they don't invest in it. So it doesn't matter what Rooney Rule or updates they make to it. They could have people interview up to 15 minority candidates. It's not going to change anything until you get to the root of the problem. And that's exactly what they're refusing to do. I mean, and no one's going to be satisfied, and they can keep making revisions to this, but they have their head so far up their ass, nothing's really going to change. Now, since I like talking about controversial subjects, I'm going to stay with the same thing because Donald Sterling, that Donald Sterling was in the news again. Apparently, and this whole story just absolutely cracks me up. Donald Sterling, the former owner of the Los Angeles Clippers, apparently told Doc Rivers, who is the coach, back when they were considering signing J.J. Reddick as a free agent, he didn't want J.J. Reddick because he was a white guy. Donald Sterling's a white guy, and he was labeled as a racist in the media years ago. And now this absolutely cracks me up. Let's break down the whole Donald Sterling thing, shall we? He had a mistress or a sugar baby. That's what she was. She was a sugar baby. He'd give her tons of money, in exchange for basically sex. Now, let's put it this way. He was self-aware enough to understand about himself that, hey, every time we make love, I'm having to take this giant colostomy bag of mine and rest it on her bladder. And she's probably has eyes like this thinking, oh my God, this thing can pop at any moment at a sudden moment's notice. He knew that. And he said, you know what? I know you like BBC. You like BBC, and you know what? Go ahead. I know the arrangement here. You're probably repulsed by me. You're repulsed by me and my colostomy bag and my old wrinkled balls. So he basically says, you know what? You like BBC? Go slobber on 100 of those things. I don't care. Just don't cuckold me publicly. Just don't be taking pictures with the guys you're sleeping with, posted on your social media, and publicly cuckold me. That's a reasonable guy. That's perfectly reasonable. Don't publicly cuckold me, and this arrangement could go on. And then all of a sudden, this witch has the audacity to go and record him and take this poor old man and publicly humiliate him to the point where he has to go sell his team. On top of that, the Clippers were destined to make a real serious push that year at the NBA Finals. This is when the perfect opportunity. Kobe was still with the Lakers, but they were down. They had a chance to go take a piece of the LA pie. And then this came out in the middle of a playoff series. It distracted the team, distracted the coaching staff, and it was they just crapped the bed. And then he has to, this patriot has to sell his life's blood and work because he bought the Clippers when they were in San Diego for $12 million. And then this witch makes this man give up his life's work. And he did sell the team for $2.2 billion. So that's quite an exchange in the investment there. But my God, this Donald Sterling was being perfectly reasonable in this situation. He said, have all the BBC you want. Honey, it's okay. Let's just keep this arrangement going. And she totally railroads him. Unbelievable. And people clutch their pearls about what he said. Oh my God. Oh, and they're not saying anything about this devil of a woman. And it's funny because maybe he's not a racist. Maybe he's just an equal opportunity racist. He hates his own people playing ball. And let's be honest. We've all been there watching a basketball game, and we thought, is it me or does this game seem a little bit pink to you? Yeah, it's a bit pink. There's too many white players on the court. See, you've had that feeling too, and don't tell me it's okay. This is the internet now. You can hide behind this. You had the same feeling too, and I rest my case. Anyway, speaking of sporting news and football and basketball, the combining the two, LeBron James just mentioned on a podcast the other week that he had an opportunity during the NBA lockout, during the 2011 lockout, that he had a chance to sign with the Dallas Cowboys, and he was working out, really considering being an NFL football player. He was training like a football player, and was really actually considering this. Whether this is all true, I don't know. This is what he says. And he says he has a contract that signed from Jerry Jones, mind you, that's in his living room. Now, what really tripped me out about this was how people straight up poo-pooed this right from the beginning. They said, oh, LeBron, he's not going to be a football player. This guy was an All-American in high school. Probably would have gone to his any choice of college had he stayed that route. Probably ended up playing at the Ohio State University. Here's the thing. It would have been right in a certain situation. LeBron was 26 years old in 2011. Okay? So he was still definitely in his athletic prime. He's a guy who takes care of his body. He spends over $1 million a year dedicated to keeping his body upright and healthy. That's why he's still playing at such a high level at 35 years old. With that being said, I don't think it would have worked out with the Cowboys. Reason being, Jason Garrett has a way of, when he looks at a player and is evaluating them, he takes a look at a player and he says, okay, how does this player fit into what we do? Whereas a coach like Sean Payton takes a look at a talent like LeBron James. It's like, okay, how can we maximize this guy's potential? That's different. I think with the Cowboys, you would have saw, if he would have signed with the Cowboys, I think you would have saw him playing a more traditional wide tight end, because a lack of a guy who's not very creative like a Jason Garrett would have basically said, okay, we're going to line you up at a wide tight end, and we want to see if you can be able to block before we even consider getting you the football. And that would have been an absolute disaster. It would have. But you can't tell me a creative coach like Sean Payton, who built a career with Jimmy Graham, wouldn't have gotten the same results with the LeBron James. There's who on the field could cover a LeBron James. He would have put him all over the field. He would have split him up wide. He would have lined him up as a wide tight end or in the slot, had him eat up the field with seam routes. Now you put him in that situation. Who on the field's going to cover him? No linebacker can run with LeBron James. Not up the seam. No safety in the league can run with LeBron James. And hey, you want to put your cornerback on him? And now today's game, they're going with bigger and taller and longer cornerbacks. You think a 6'2" cornerback is going to be able to compete for a jump ball with LeBron James, who's 6'8" or 9" and has a 40-inch vertical leap? No, he would have eaten the middle of the field like crazy. Or if a team like the New England Patriots were to have signed him, just look at how they used Aaron Hernandez at that time. Yeah, I know, Aaron Hernandez. Ha ha, he's a murderer. But it's funny because he's dead now. Seriously, look at the way the Patriots used Aaron Hernandez. They lined him up in the backfield as an H-back. They lined him up at tailback sometimes. They split him out. They put him up the seam. And he destroyed the league. LeBron James is just a bigger, more athletic version of someone like an Aaron Hernandez. I think he absolutely would have been a superstar in with certain teams. Not every team, but with special coaching staffs. Speaking of LeBron, it's funny as hell. Paul Pierce. I've never seen an analyst who's so out of touch with their own ability than Paul Pierce. If you remember, he was saying he was better than Dwayne Wade. No. Usually when you're breaking down who the best two guards were of all time, everyone says MJ, Kobe, and usually the third on that list is normally Dwayne Wade. Nowhere in the top 5 is Paul Pierce even mentioned. So that was just completely ridiculous. And then he comes out with saying that LeBron James isn't a top 10 player of all time. And then they add legitimate beef. First and foremost, LeBron James was better at basketball at 19 years old than you were in the middle of your prime, first of all. Second of all, there was times where apparently it got physical, and in 2007 or 2011, that he tried to fight LeBron in the locker room after. LeBron James could have kicked your ass at 16 years old. Ever since LeBron was 16 years old, he would have slapped the crap out of you. You would have taken that little headband of yours, flossed his butt with it, and shoved it right into your mouth, and you wouldn't have a word to say about it or done anything to stop him. That's just reality. This isn't a guy who's made any valid points to why LeBron isn't a top 10 scorer. That's where I would have a lot more respect for his opinion. LeBron is not a top 10 player. These players are better, and here's why. He can't do any of that. He just sits there and is, LeBron. Let's put it that way. It's not a fair fight on the court, and it wouldn't have been a fair fight off the court. Plain and simple. Now, this is going to be the only time I'm going to comment on this, because this thing should have died down months ago. And that's the contract, or the potential contract, of Dak Prescott. Everyone has their opinions of it, and people saying he's not a franchise quarterback. He isn't a franchise quarterback. Oh, he is, but he has a lot of talent around him. Which one is it? And here's the problem I have. Most people can't articulate what a franchise quarterback even is. They can't. And here's what a franchise quarterback to me is. It is the engine that drives a very high-powered offense, and he's the face of your franchise, and surrounded with enough talent, you believe he can win it all with it. Okay? Now, here's the funny part, because people like to pick apart Dak and say, well, he had a lot of talent. He's had a lot of talent, or, he didn't win with a lot of talent. But the funny thing is, he has the third most, since he's been in the league, he has the third most wins by any starting quarterback. He's number 3. And then they say, oh, no, well, he's not. They went 8-8 last season with all that talent, yada, yada, yada. But if you look at Dak Prescott, he was the engine that drove that Cowboys offense last season. First 3 years in the league was a different story. If you wanted to beat the Dallas Cowboys from 2016 through 2018, you had to stop Ezekiel Elliott. That was Ezekiel Elliott's offense. No ands, ifs, or buts. And you had to stop Ezekiel Elliott. And then with that being said, you'd have to depend on Dak just making enough plays to win. That changed last season. He was the engine that drove that team up and down the field, and you had to go stop Dak Prescott to beat the Cowboys. Now, and here's the thing that no one takes into account. People say he's loaded with talent. Then why were the Cowboys ranked number 30th, tied for 30th in the league in defensive turnovers last year if they're so talented? Then why were they ranked 30th in total special teams if they were so talented? If they were so talented, why did the Cowboys offense lead the league by a 7% margin in dropped passes? Huh? I thought they were talented. And these are all catchable passes. For it to be considered a drop, that has to be considered a catchable pass. They led the league with 46 drops. That's almost 3 a game. So he did not get the help that they deemed necessary. I guarantee you, had they had at least league average special teams or league average turnover production from their defense, that's a 12-win team with the same production on offense. That's a 12-win team. They lost a lot of close games last year, and they did so with subpar coaching. If you look at the trends the Cowboys had on first and second down, they loved running into a brick wall. No one loves to play crash dummy and run into a brick wall more than Jason Garrett. And this is another myth. They say it helps your quarterback. No, it doesn't. Giving your quarterback one opportunity to convert a first down is not helping. And no one converted at a higher rate last season and third down and longs or third down conversion in general than Dak Prescott with limited opportunities. So, yeah, he did so with subpar coaching, and he clearly proved last season he was a franchise quarterback, in my opinion. Now, it's very interesting to see the comparisons between him and Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson, they had a lot of the same things. They had very similar stats, in whether it was passing yards, yards per attempt, total touchdowns, very, very similar for the first 4 years. And I remember people love to have revisionist history. They just love it. When Russell Wilson got his extension, he was one of the highest paid quarterbacks in the league at around $25 million a year. People were saying he didn't deserve it. And this was a guy who went to consecutive Super Bowls, winning one of them. They said Russell Wilson wasn't a franchise quarterback. And now we look at him and say, okay, you can't name another two quarterbacks that are better than or playing better than Russell Wilson. Dak Prescott has a very similar projection in that way. And they're having a lot of the same conversations about Dak Prescott they did about Russell Wilson. It's going to be interesting. I guarantee you in 4 years from now, we're going to have a very different look at Dak Prescott. And it's interesting because people are getting very hung up on the numbers. They're getting hung up on the numbers because right now he's on a franchise tag paying him upwards of $31 million a year. That's a lot of money. Now, if they gave him an extension for $35 million a year, that are people that are saying that that's too much money. It's interesting because if they don't get a deal done between July 5th now and July 15th, Dak might play another year on the franchise tag, paying him over $37 million a year. You know, so that's already more money than he would be getting. And then here's the thing. The Cowboys need to get this deal done. They do. Because the longer this goes on, you might as well hand Dak a blank check. And a lot of things are being said about whether they want a 5th-year deal and Dak wants a 4-year deal. The Cowboys should be lucky he's not asking for a 3-year deal. Kirk Cousins has signed back-to-back 3-year contracts with the Vikings. Laramie Tunsil just signed a 3-year contract extension with the Texans. That's the going rate from players around the league. You're going to start seeing, as more and more free agents get signed now, you're going to see a lot more 3-year contracts from these guys. Now, if Dak really wanted to bend the Cowboys over, Brokeback style, he'd ask for 3 years. And if they don't get a deal done by July 15th, next offseason, what's stopping Dak from asking for another 3-year contract, for a 3-year contract? So the Cowboys have got to get this done. Otherwise, they might as well hand him a blank check and basically say, why don't we sign you for 3 years instead of our original 5 offer? Get the deal done at 4 if they have any intelligence. Speaking of Russell Wilson, it was reported this week that Russell Wilson really wants Antonio Brown to be a Seattle Seahawk. Now, is this a fit? Let's break it down. Look at the Seattle Seahawks as a culture, the culture that Pete Carroll has established. They're a very tolerant culture. They're open-minded to free spirits. They're just a more open. They're open to free spirits, and they're open to off-the-wall guys. That's a fit and all that other gay stuff, but they're going to be a lot more tolerant with someone like Antonio Brown than they would have been if he signed with the Patriots, because at least with the Patriots there was leadership in that locker room, and you knew who the boss of that team was. Bill Belichick was not going to tolerate any of his tomfoolery. Tom Brady wasn't going to tolerate any of that either. But where is that with the Seahawks? they're going to tolerate his stuff. They're used to having people with strong personalities. Remember when Russell Wilson broke into the league in his first 4 years? That was not his locker room. He was not a leader of that locker room. It was guys like Richard Sherman. It was guys like Cam Chancellor, guys like Michael Bennett, guys like Earl Thomas. Those guys were the guys with strong personalities, and those were the leaders in that locker room. Actually, they didn't like the fact that Russell Wilson was their quarterback, even criticizing his blackness at times. They didn't think Russell Wilson was even black enough, and they did everything possible to make Russell Wilson not a leader in that locker room. Now, those players have since gone on. And so this is Russell Wilson's locker room right now. It's a very young team, a young, impressionable team. And on top of it, introducing a guy like Antonio Brown, and who's gonna police him? Is Pete Carroll gonna police him? No, he's Mr. Flowers in your hair and fun in the sun. Do you think Russell Wilson has an assertive enough of a personality to police Antonio Brown? I don't think so. I think he hijacks that locker room from day one, and people start following him over Russell Wilson. I think that's an extremely difficult signing if it ever were to happen. Now, speaking of people coming back into the league, Aldon Smith was reinstated not too long ago. And here's the funny thing, because when it ever comes to the Cowboys, people have just retarded polarization of the team. They think, oh, he's not going to be a 19 and a half sack guy. What are they thinking? But here, Alton Smith, of course he's not going to be a 19 and a half sack player after not playing in the league for 4.5 years. But he could get you 6. Realistically, he could get you 6 sacks. And would it blow you away if he got 8 or 9 sacks? No. If you're being honest, would it blow you away? You would not be blown away if he got 8 or 9 sacks. Would that be very good production? Absolutely. Is it to be expected? No. But it wouldn't be out of this world if he got you 8 or 9 sacks next season. And when you break down a player like Aldon Smith, what I really like about him is the number of ways you can use him as a rusher. Now, and he's linked up with his former position coach in Jim Tomasula, who is arguably one of the best defensive line coaches in all of football. Now, in San Francisco, he was used primarily as a 3-4 outside linebacker as an edge rusher. That's the way he was used. Dallas is using some 3-4 concepts there, even though their base personnel is going to be 4-3. So he can give you an opportunity to rush from a 2-point stance. He could rush from a 3-point stance. He did that as well. So he could give you dimensions in the way he can attack a team. On top of it, they say he weighs 287 pounds right now. Really? You don't think you could kick him inside on 3rd down or a pass rushing situation, have him line up as a defensive tackle, and have an interior offensive lineman have to deal with his elite explosiveness? No, he could wreak havoc. And so I'm interested in the way they are going to use him, because they can use him in several different ways. And I think he's one of those guys who just knows how to generate pressure. Now, something the NFL is tinkering with here is the onside kick rule. What they're offering right now is an opportunity, instead of a kick, a team could take the ball from their own 25-yard line, and they have a chance to convert a 4th and 15. Why don't you just eliminate special teams? Seriously, that's essentially what you're saying. Every year they're trying to tinker with ways they can make the game more safe. Okay, fine. All those are coming at the expense of special teams, which I think is a very underrated portion of the game. It's one of the reasons why New England's always competitive. It's very underrated. New England's always competitive because they value special teams. The good teams in the league value special teams. That's just the way it is. And I think even Andy Reid, who spoke about this earlier, no one would have a bigger advantage than Andy Reid when it comes to converting 4th and 15th in a Mahomes-led offense. Even he says, why are we doing this? Why don't we keep the integrity of the game? So keep the onside kick, for God's sakes. God, the stuff they actually take, the league actually takes into consideration is effing hilarious. Anyway, moving on to some fights. I don't know if anyone saw the Anthony Smith versus Glover Teixeira fight 2 weeks ago, Wednesday. And this was controversial because you saw Anthony Smith. He played a much faster style than what he was used to. Throwing pawing a lot of jabs, a lot of work in that fight. He was gassed by round 2. You could see it. He was breathing heavily out of his mouth, and then he got it taking it to him. He was gassed and didn't have the energy, and he was just getting obliterated in rounds 3 and 4. And here's the funny thing. Going into round 5, in his corner, he says to his cornerman, "My teeth are falling out. Your teeth are falling out." And you could see during the fight, when he's getting pounded on, you see him reach for one of his teeth. He took his tooth and handed it to the referee while he's getting punched in the face on the ground. And his corner still doesn't stop the fight. And the ref doesn't stop the fight. Something's got to happen. I'm sorry. And Anthony Smith later admitted that he told his corner, whether you work with him or not, if you stop my fight, we're done doing business. I think that's not a realistic expectation you could put on a coach. Because if we've learned anything through history and in sports, or just in the job sector, if people are always going to take the job security over doing what is considered to be the right thing. I'm looking at you, Penn State, but it's a fact. It's just a fact. And if you look at Deontay Wilder's fight with Tyson Fury, you couldn't have named a bigger fight this year or the last few years. It was the biggest heavyweight fight we've seen in probably 20 years. Yet some guy, an assistant cornerman, stepped and stopped that fight, and he was fired immediately. But you have to take into consideration, live to fight another day. And I understand these coaches know their fighters better than the general public, but someone's got to step in. If it's not the coaches, the referees have to take a more proactive stance. Because, listen, if a dude's losing his teeth and he's clearly gassed, you have to stop that fight. End of story. Anyway, I'm going to end on this. We got a big fight this weekend. Oh boy. Tyron Woodley versus Gilbert Burns. And it's quite interesting because it's going to be the first time Tyron Woodley has fought in over a year, 15 months. And Gilbert Burns is no tomato can. And one of the things I love about Tyron Woodley, and I think when you're building a team, regardless of any sport, and if you want a champion, you build it with elite traits. You don't want someone who's good at just good at everything. You want someone who's elite. Just take a look at the Super Bowl last year. You had an elite offense in the Kansas City Chiefs, and you had an elite defensive front in the San Francisco 49ers. You had eliteness versus eliteness. That's how champions are made. And Tyron Woodley has elite explosiveness. Elite. And he could put you to sleep in a heartbeat in a number of ways. One, he could knock you the frick out. Two, he could be very conservative, his gas tank, and he could lull you to sleep. I mean, he might as well drop some GHB in your drink and lull you to sleep. And that's That's what's really going to make this fight to me. Are you going to see an aggressive Tyron Woodley where he knocks the piss out of you? Or are you going to see a guy who's GHBing you, lulling you to sleep? Look at his fight against Robbie Lawler. Look at his fight against Darren Till. You take a look at that guy and you say, who's going to beat that guy? And then you take a look at his 2 fights with Wonder Boy Thompson and his fights with Damian Maia and his fight against in his fight most recently against Kamaru Usman, and you don't think this guy could beat Teddy Ruxpin. Okay? So we don't know what's going to happen in this fight, which makes it particularly interesting. Gilbert Burns has elite traits. He's an elite grappler. You do not want to be on the ground with that guy. Tyron Woodley's no fool when it comes to the groundwork, but he's not the elite caliber of grappler of Gilbert Burns. And I commend Tyron Woodley for taking the fight in the first place. He's ranked number 1 at the welterweight division. Okay? His last fight, he lost his title. Gilbert Burns is the 6th ranked welterweight in the world. If Tyron Woodley wins and wins impressively, you can't necessarily say he's going to be the number 1 contender, even though he'd technically be ranked that. They can easily run back Kamaru Usman versus Colby Covington before that fight ever happens again. They could very easily have Jorge Masvidal versus Kamaru Usman, that fight. So he might have to wait a little bit, even with a win here. However, with a loss, this could be a tremendous blow to him. I think he could easily fall 4 spots in the rankings. He could fall behind Colby Covington. He could fall behind Jorge Masvidal. He could fall behind Gilbert Burns, and he could fall behind someone else. His name's slipping my mind, but the guy the British guy who he was originally supposed to be fighting. He could be ranked number 5 if he loses. And this isn't some spring chicken anymore. He's 38 years old. How much longer can a 38-year-old preserve an explosive striking style? Not for long. So time is not on his side. But with an impressive win, I just don't see him jumping that high up in people's opinion, and still might have to wait a while before he gets a title shot again. So I think it's very interesting what might happen if he loses. He's got a lot to lose. So I commend someone like him in this situation for taking the fight in the first place. We're going to see fireworks, baby, on Saturday. Anyways, that's all I got for you this week. If you want to follow me on, I almost said Facebook. Facebook's like having a Hotmail account. If you want to follow me on Twitter, you may do so and join the millions and millions of Nate's fans at No Remorse Sports. There's no space in that. I make it perfectly clear. If you can read right there, you should join the millions of my fans that are going to turn to hundreds of millions, that are going to turn to billions and billions, and then I'm going to run amok, because that's just what I do. Tune me in next week, 3 p.m. Pacific time, excuse me. We're going to have No Remorse Sports. People, we need a hero. I'm your quarantine hero in the sports world, baby. Come check me out tomorrow. I'm going to be on the round table with Van. Come join the millions. I'm out.